taking his time, and it's like 35 pages of documents and all this other stuff, but he's not a lawyer. And there's, you know, a lot of concern that they're basically like giving off, like that they're jettisoning like a huge part of their power, even if not in like, this is why it's useful to not think of it in terms of like the law or like legal capacity, even not if in legal documents, but in terms of the court of public opinion and the way that they're held to bear, which impacts their stock prices dramatically. So shareholders could have suit if they don't like, you know, the fact that this board has been created and they think it hurts the overall image of Facebook or like does all those other things. On the other hand, most people think that the board will only help the image of Facebook because it'll make users feel like they have more accountability and more trust in the site in general. Oh, I should also add Instagram is in scope. So Instagram is also in scope of WhatsApp, all of the messenger services, Libra, the dating app, none of those are in scope at the moment. So but that's something else that might change.
In terms of reasoning, so when the board issues a decision back to Facebook, do we know what type of reasoning it has to provide either Facebook or the user itself in terms of why we did what we did? And I understand that surely there would be reasoning as part of the policy recommendations, you should consider that. And why? I assume it wouldn't be just, consider manure.
We don't know. We don't know. I mean, like, right?
I would say, at least in the bylaws, you would expect that to be...
It says well-reasoned opinion. This is a well-reasoned.
Well-reasoned.
It's a very vague standard. I mean, like, we have these things, I used to clerk in the appellate court in the U.S. Second Circuit. And we have these things called summary orders. I don't know if you guys have these or what you call them, but we just, like the judge doesn't even give the facts of the case, they just give a paragraph basically. So while I was clerking, this really odd thing started to happen or had been happening over a number of years, which was that, you know, clerks write the summary orders, like idiots like me who are just out of law school, you know, and everyone approves them. But like the summary orders were starting to become like 6 and 7 or 8 pages long, and they would have all of the facts of the case that we were just like rubber stamping, and they're not precedential. I should be really clear about that. The summary orders are not precedent. Like, you're not supposed to cite to them for precedent. And like increasingly, when I was at the district court, like the year before that, which was the lower trial court, I was getting all of these cases that people were like very long summary orders that had a lot of facts in them. So they looked like, and then you'd go and you'd check the site and be like, oh, this isn't precedential. Like, this is not a case, like, this is an error to cite this case. But because by the normative standard, these were just stretching into longer and longer opinions and had more in them, people started like just using them more and more like actual decisions. And that's kind of what I mean by like, we have no idea what well-reasoned means.
Would there be a database? Would there be a database?
Yes, there's a database of all of the decisions, which is, I think, one of the best things to come out of this. There will be a body of law that's public. That's what disturbs me so much about all of the platform governance is there's a wonderful, I've never read it, but a guy who's been litigating on Amazon through Amazon's customer service for like the last 15 years, and he's written like basically a law of, like a case book of like all of the different kinds of ways to like, but like that's, why is one dude like writing that entire book, right? Like
they have an industry. People actually
and there's an industry of it, but
the...
like there's an industry of it, but it's like all like it's very you have to know it's completely opaque and it's not distributed, and like there's also just kind of, and one of the reasons, frankly, is like this process has been so interesting to me because transparency is such a double-edged sword in all of this, and ease of information. The more you know about how these things work, like the less legitimacy you have, and also the more bad actors can take advantage of the system, right? And that's like, and like there has been, I think, a rallying cry around transparency, but it is such a fine line between like transparency and legitimacy. Frankly, I think there are trade-offs in a lot of areas. Like, one of the things that has made me think about, and I can't believe I've never thought about it before, but this stage, where all of the panels deliberate anonymously, I was like, well, this seems like bullshit. Why are they all deliberating anonymously? And I was like, Wait, all of the panels that I know, like the Supreme Court, we don't even get to see this stage. We don't even get to see how they pick any of the decisions. That we know all the cases that are presented for writ, but we have no idea what they consider when they're trying to decide which of the 1% of cases they choose to go up to have.
There is a huge difference. This is because there is a social, institutional, political infrastructure that select these people and make sure that some people will not be on that, on these
But
boards.
it's
And so this is sort of especially in the United States, you really care about who is making, these decisions that you're not always aware of, right? And it's like
You mean
you
the
don't know
courts
the
will make
deliberation,
consent-
but you've heard them, the hearings for weeks before they were elected.
Sure.
And so this is not,
Yeah.
these are not anonymous people in any way.
Well, these won't be anonymous people. Like, the entire board won't be anonymous. So to that point, you're correct. But look, we don't know how any of the individual justices vote on writ, and we do trust it because I think you hit on it exactly, because we have this social, historical institution that has both, but like that institution was there before I was born and will probably exist after I'm born, and I didn't have any moment in which I, being born into this system, legitimated this, right? Like, I didn't vote on like the Supreme Court existing or not. There's nothing, it continues to exist, and it's beyond my individual autonomy, right? So I think that that's an interesting thing, because if you think about this in terms of that and you stop taking for granted all of those norms and you think about this as an institution building and trust in institution, there's so much research on institution building, maintaining in institutions. Like, institutions have been created, and like, how do people lose or like gain their trust in them, like governments and things like that. Very little is about how you build trust in something from the very beginning, and this is something that has kind of made me question like a lot of the legitimacy theory, a lot of the transparency stuff that I've kind of just like, how great is it that we know how the sausage is made? But at the same time, I really am sick of not knowing how the sausage gets made in this entire system. So, yeah.
So one question, let's say that the ACLU or the EFF has, they tried some content was taken down, and then we don't really know what happened in the decision, but then it was taken down eventually. Now, can the ACLU EFF try to say, Facebook just took down the Statue of David because of these general reasoning, and you don't really know what happened there, and might that have an effect, much like or similar to the Streisand effect in that aspect? So that would be some sort of oversight over the things that are taken down without reasoning?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think that the biggest thing that the board creates is a chink in the armor for what Facebook owes us as users from a public relations standpoint. And that's really all it is. But that's pretty huge when you think about the only way that they make money is by people continuing to use their site and see their ads. And so if people do not trust trust the institution itself enough to continue to use it, they will lose users and become irrelevant. And so the relevancy, the only way they can maintain relevancy at this point, because they're so large, is to start becoming more democratic. I a little bit think there's a lot of people who say that this is all just some big PR thing, and I think that yes and also yes. Like, that's
Yeah, but let me just
Why would
challenge
they do that?
this. So this is so your idea is like what you say is that they have built-in incentives to do the right thing because they need to be legitimate, because otherwise people will not use them. But I don't care. I mean, I'm not using Facebook, and I'm offended by things in Facebook, and I'm hurt by things. It's like when in Facebook you have fake news and the United States president is being elected based on this. You're concerned about it, and this has externalities to lots of communities that are not represented in Facebook. So who cares about the Facebook users when it actually affects many other, constituencies that are not part of this, the checks and balances that you described.
You know who you'd get along with so great? Mark Zuckerberg, who literally keeps changing all of the terminology in all of these documents from the word users. He strikes it out and puts people.
Yes, of
And
course.
every
This is
single
a-
time he does this, I'm like, it's not people. You don't represent people, crazy person. Like, this is
The users either.
but he would make the argument that you're making. I think you're completely right, and I would argue that that's completely correct. But I do think if you have to have some type of, sorry, I know that Europe is big on extraterritorial jurisdiction at the moment. Sorry, the ECJ in particular, but which I'm like a little have a chip on my shoulder about. But I do think that, like, sure, but you don't have standing. Like, if you want to have standing to appeal one of these things, you just got to get on Facebook, and you can. Anyone can. Unlike being a citizen in a place or having whatever type of thing. If you go and you have your issues with something, go on Facebook and like raise it. I think that's an easy. I get what you're saying, but like there's plenty of decisions to get made in China and like affect me, but like I do not have any say over how those get made. Yeah.
So, I understand they had a bunch of meetings with smart stakeholders from different fields, but I mean, the whole issue of legitimacy in dispute system design, which is what this is like a whole field
Yes.
where there is so much written about it, and so many principles and ethics and rules and values, and I mean, not the authenticity BS, if I may.
Yeah.
But you know, many generally accepted principles, and it doesn't seem. It seems like this is interacting with it on like a superficial level, and not
Absolutely.
really, you know.
I mean, I think that that's a little bit inevitable when you do something at this scale. Like, I will say that it seemed, all I can say is that having been at just 2 of the meetings and then looking at a lot of the reports that people filed and having access to all of the things, you did see ideas coalescing. You did see them replicating after like 1,000 people. Like the same ideas kept coming up again and again and again. Like it wasn't like they missed certain things, but like there were those who really thought that there should be like a strong human rights background, like international human rights should be like the foundation of like the entire board and how it was created. And like that came up over and over and over again, and substantively reflected in some of the documents. Not as strongly as some people want, but like it's, you know, that's there. But yeah, there are, I think it's not perfect. I also don't think anyone will ever do this again. So one of the things we haven't talked about is how,
Or ever.
what?
Or maybe at all.
Or maybe at all, but I think they're screwed if they don't release this. I mean, I think that they've really put themselves in a really hard position, to be perfectly honest. I mean, they might not, I think that they have to. I thought that maybe it wouldn't happen, and now I think if it will be, I think how much I know, or how much people know about this, it's just going to be out there as either the biggest failed experiment, and like how robust this entire system is, or not. You know, you can call it both.
I don't
But
know.
it goes both ways, right? It is superficial, right? It is superficial, and it is also like incredibly detailed in a lot of ways.
At the end of the day, it depends on what happens, you know, and how they.
Yeah.
I mean, what would seem to me to be the minimal requirement is for them to commit that this is an ongoing design, which would continually study what's going on with the data through what will actually happen when they address cases. And I mean, so even that principle is unclear whether.
The money thing from the trust is interesting because I think that they're giving, I think, at least $50 million, which is a significant amount of money, and it's enough for the board to run for 2 or 3 years. And at that point, they're trying to figure out how they will give money to the board to endow it in perpetuity. But it has to prove that it can be something. It can, and I'd be interested in what people think. Right now they're balancing a bunch of outcome-based measures, and outcome-based measures, in my opinion, are complete bullshit because like you can just like scrape along at the very bottom of them and hit them all, and like of course all of these people that are asking to be on this board like are going to hit all those measures because they have to, and then they're going to be able to have some. So, but I'm trying to think of like some. It was like, how about a vote? Like a vote of who? I'm like, users, like on like whether they want people, thank you, people about whether they want the board, and like no one likes. thinks that that's a good idea. They're like, not a referendum. Referendums are, to their credit, I also think referendums are terrible. So yeah.
Yeah, I was wondering whether the procedure, again, my question goes to the incentives of Facebook, because I think this is really interesting. And the sense that I'm getting is that, in a way, the procedure is, it's signaling to us what the incentives are. Because if, the case that triggered this was the fact that if you have, let's say you have fake news, political fake news, okay? But there's only one case. Facebook does not necessarily have to take down all the similar cases like that.
Yeah.
So what does it say about Facebook's incentives? Is it not using a procedure that looks like it's solving the problem, but it's solving it at an individual level, while how would that affect the legitimacy? And so that goes back to the question of
this is so limited. I mean, this is like a tiny, but like you have to
exactly.
But and I said it wasn't legal, so like one of the things that when I found this out, I was actually upset for like a day, the whole week. I was like very depressed. But they can't because it's actually they can't give more power more directly because they have a lot like their shareholders. They can't, or they're going to get. They're gonna get sued. They're gonna get sued anyway. Like this is all gonna be sued. All of my notes, they're gonna get like subpoenaed in like discovery. Like I like have like all of this. Like this is just gonna happen. But this is something that like they know. So this is like why it's so limited. But this is what I'm trying to say. Like listen, you have to both accept that yes, it's just PR, but also yes, it's just PR, and maybe that's actually huge because this is the only thing that they're susceptible to. It is a combination of like, to use like Sid Hirsch's like example, like voice exit loyalty. Like this is like the public relations aspect of this is voice exit loyalty. It's voice, it's like people not using the platform, and it's people being loyal to the platform. And like I would add the one thing that all of those equal is market share. And so they just, once you have like some type of control over those three things, like people leave. Once you can package up, once you create a bad news story or do something else, once you create an expectation for this. That's it's actually one other reason I think that they never released the private side of the rules for so long, by the way, was that I think that there is, especially in American, but in general, I think a democratic culture in which if you know about something and you're told that it exists, you feel like you have a right to it or an expectation level that's created to change it or have input into it. And so when they told us in detail what all the rules were, then people are like, well, why don't we get to tell you what the rules are? Why are we being governed in this thing? And that's what I think was the beginning of this phase of like having an oversight board and having more democratic processes. The alternative to this, of course, is like they get broken up in antitrust and regulation. You have to remember that they're doing this all in the shadow of that. You also have to remember that this is basically the democratization of a platform that is a for-profit company, which I said before. So this is a fascinating experiment from that. It's never happened before. But there is just so much that's going on in terms of what their motivations are, to your point, that like sometimes I get bogged down in that, and then I'm just kind of like, it really doesn't matter. Because all that matters is how this ends up looking, and what it ends up quite frankly, promising. That's all that matters. If people feel like it's been a promise to do something, they will hold Facebook to that promise, and then that will be like the push and shove. And so I think that's kind of the big deal.
Okay, so thank you. Your analysis was great, absolutely great, and my point is that your analysis proves that the system doesn't work. No,
Which system?
that system. So first of all, I think that it's totally a PR stunt. First of all, and second of all, I'm going to exemplify with two examples. One of my recent articles about the dark web. Now I found out that pedophiles and drug dealers and neo-Nazis and KKKs, they all start on social media like Facebook, then they move towards the Gab AI and such, and then they go to dark web. So you're actually not dealing with a problem, you're just doing, please, you're saying, do whatever you need to do, you pedophile or you neo-Nazi, but don't do it on my grounds, on my
Yeah.
court. And the second example is somebody who's driving the road. Now let's say somebody is driving the road with his car and he crashed his car. And the police comes and takes away his license. But then he gets a motorcycle and drives, the same happens, then the police comes, gets his license for the motorcycle. Then he starts riding bicycles, then the same happens. So this won't affect and influence the characters of the people who are sub and non-normative in society.
Yeah.
So,
No, that's correct. This is not for that. Like this is
so
not
what's the real essence of
because
this
there's
system?
tons of stuff that exists in the world between pedophilia and like permissible nudity, because there's like a ton of stuff. Bad actors, people that are. I think your point is excellent. And I completely agree with everything you said. I have made this argument for a long time, actually, that there's like not, I haven't studied it, so I'd love to talk to you more about it. But by deplatforming people, by pushing the bad actors off of these things, you put them into new spaces, just put them into different spaces where it's harder to patrol them, it's harder to see them, it's harder to know what's going on, like Gab, like all of these, like 8chan, like all of these when I was horrified when they deplatformed 8chan, personally, because I just know that like governments that fight to control bad actors who are going to do these things, like have long histories and really extensive histories of the platform so that they can police people on them, and you threaten a lot of those systems by deplatforming them. So I agree with that completely, but this isn't about that. This is about all of the speech that is not, that like, it's about me making a political statement. I don't know if you watched the TikTok video, but like, and having like Osama bin Laden in the back of like my thing about making a statement about the Uyghurs and like having a state like Osama bin Laden and getting deplatformed because of that, or like getting my speech taken down because of that. It's about, in the US, someone saying the N-word, but the N-word is totally different when it's like black people saying it to each other, and it's totally different when it's like in lyrics to a song, and it's totally different depending on the context, but then it's awful, and just never said in other contexts, and so like, those are all, but some of those contexts, and you can also use it when you're trying to protest certain ideas, and like, those are kind of the moments that are the hardest. And where this platform is the most, where major platforms are the most useful. So like Alex Jones in the US, I don't know if you know who that is, but he's a very controversial radio host, was deplatformed for a period of time for saying a number of things about the Sandy Hook murders, that was like claiming that they were fake. And among other things, anti-Muslim, like other terrible statements, and he said all of these things, and he was deplatformed, and he misses that platform. He has a bajillion users that use him on that platform and click through to his website, his personal website, and that's how they get it all. And so they're not going to go to it's a friction thing. They're not going to go to the trouble to go find him on his new website and look up his radio show. They just click on it when they comes up with the feed.
Actually, the example of the site named Der Stürmer, which is
the Daily Stormer with Cloudflare.
Yeah. So they were on the surface web, and then after the shootings in Charlottesville, they moved to the dark web. So they took all their users who are, neo-Nazis and KKK.
Yeah, but it's a smaller percentage. Like Daily Stormer is a great example. So that was, if anyone knows the Daily Stormer example, it was hosted widely on the surface web, and then after the Charlottesville killing and the Charlottesville protests, it bounced from DNS to DNS to DNS at various servers all over the world, and like finally Cloudflare, which hosts like one of the only like accessible levels of DDoS protection to prevent like kind of bots coming at you and like taking down your site, which it was, Daily Stormer was a very controversial site, so a lot of hackers were aiming to kind of take it down. One of the only sites that provides DDoS protection that is affordable to a smaller no money website like Daily Stormer was Cloudflare. And Cloudflare got hit by a ton of requests to take down the Daily Stormer. And so they did. They just did, and then their CEO, Matthew Prince, wrote this long blog post about how mercurial it was that like they were subject to all of this PR, and then took down the site. So this is actually a great example to go to argue against your point and to make my point again, which is like, there you see, all it took was a lot of PR to get the Daily Stormer down.
Yeah, but
That is
it-
the end of the day, like what ends up kind of controlling. Sorry. Well, we can talk later. Yeah.
I'm interested in your role in the story. I think it's really interesting that they allowed you this access, and like you said at the beginning, you're not 100% sure why they gave you this access, but at the end of the day, when we're looking back at how this whole story developed, it's going to be through the eyes of people like you who had access but also had perspective. And so
And this Facebook gives us the official history of.
No, I'm
we
yeah.
don't expect that that's going to happen. And so in X amount of days or weeks or months, you're going to have to condense all of these really complex, nuanced discussions about this is both superficial but really detailed. It's both a PR stunt, but it is giving some kind of procedural relief to people, and it's also the democratization of a platform for-profit company, and you're going to have to turn this all into the one sentence that's going to be published in the New Yorker, and you can choose to influence the story as well. If you were to come out in this story in a really public way and say this is all a PR stunt and this isn't real, that's going to have enormous ramifications, and if you choose to support them, then that's also going to have ramifications. So I'm curious how you internalize that decision-making process.
I don't sleep very
We
well.
can often.
You're
should
going
have a board.
to give them either the stamp of approval or the stamp of delegitimacy, and a lot of people are going to be listening to you. So my question is, have you made a decision how you're going to frame these really complex decisions?
No pressure.
Yeah.
When can we expect to read the
It's,
final article?
Yeah.
We
And
can
so,
turn off the camera.
yeah, I actually would love that. Well, no, yeah. I mean, it's like, I mean, it's fine. I don't really want this to be
Yeah.
publicly posted. I said that at the beginning. I'm